Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Sunday, October 25th, 2020, 10 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Sunday. That makes it Rules Retrospective Day. We were doing spellcasting during melee last week. One of the sections of the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. Boom. And there were some kind of miscellaneous extras that are part of that section that, strictly speaking, aren't spellcasting during melee, I guess. Because they don't have to do with one individual casting a spell. They're the sections on use of a magic item and effective cover on spells and spell-like powers, and monster charm power, which is a thing. After that comes turning undead in the order in the DMG. That'll be a different show. I think that deserves its own thing. But let's clean up this miscellaneous as sort of a part two to this last week's show. Okay, so magical device attacks. I mean, they have to put this stuff in somewhere, and I guess it fits in here as well as anything. Let me just adjust the camera there so I'm not hidden, half cut off by the Adobe Acrobat program. These attacks, magical device attacks, these attacks are the spell-like discharge functions of rods, staffs, wands, and any similar items. These attacks can occur simultaneously with the discharge of missiles, spellcasting, and or turning undead. The time of such discharge by any magical device is subject to initiative determination. See also combat procedure below. So we did a whole series of shows on order of combat, initiative, and attacks, and all of that. I'll reference that because that was very complete. So this is just saying that it can happen at any time, but that they happen when they happen. There's no casting or duration. It's more like a gun, if you will, in that once you pull the trigger, that's when the attack occurs. You would still have to, if the wand is in your backpack, get it out of your backpack and point it. You have to determine certain things the same way you would a spell, because if it's a spell-like ability, it will have possibly an area of effect or the requirement that you choose a target. It will necessitate knowing what the range is for it. Where does the spell-like discharge where does that begin and where does it end are both things you'll need to know. So these, if you're a player, you'll want to be familiar with these items in advance. A lot of these items will have a trigger word. And when a trigger word is involved, don't forget that things such as a silence spell, um, things like that can interrupt the ability to utilize a similar one of these items. Um, because if you can't say the word, then it can't happen. So keep all of that in mind. Also, kind of related to spellcasting during melee is effective cover on spells and spell-like powers. Hard cover will increase chances for saving throws as noted. Cover equal to 90% or better will also give the target the benefit of no damage whatsoever if the appropriate saving throw is successful. So if you can duck behind a big old rock and make your saving throw, much like in the movie what's the name of the movie? Well, it's got a dragon in it. He hides behind a shield. I'm not sure. I don't think you give that same saving throw for a shield as if you're hiding on the other side of a large rock from, say, breath weapons, right? Dragon Slayer, that's the name of it. But this is important to know because if you are on the other side of a rock and you do make a saving throw, or if you have cover and it helps you to make a saving throw, it may be that you still get a spell to be effective that you are casting, even if it comes after some sort of counter spell has been cast toward you to try to foil your spell. So keep that in mind for those saving throws and in regard to the spellcaster who is attempting to harm their opponents. Monster Charm Power. So this is interesting. Let me read it first, then we'll talk about it. The magical charming power of creatures such as nixies and vampires is much more powerful than that of the simple charm person spell. While it will eventually wear off, until it does, the charmee is subject to mental commands by the charmer. Unlike the charm person or charm monster spell, this means that a monster charmed character does not need to speak the creature's language to understand commands from the monster which charmed it, although only basic emotions or simple commands can be mentally communicated to the charmee unless some mutual language is common to both the charmer and the charmee. While the charmed character is not an automaton, he or she will certainly hasten to carry out whatever instructions or commands are received from the charmer, except those which are obviously self-destructive. This relatively complete control of the charmee's mind enables the charmer to make the victim almost totally subject to its will, including giving up personal possessions, betraying associates, and so forth. Mental communication between charmer and charmee extends only to sight range or up to 60-foot radius if not within sight range. Magic circles of protection. Spells or specially drawn will break the communication link and seemingly cause the charm to be broken, but unless magically dispelled or until the power of the magic wears off, The effect is again evident when the charmee is outside such protection. So, although this is not doesn't have its own header, and it is not a major header, and it is following the casting spells during melee, I don't know that this actually has anything to do with that. I'm not sure why it got cobbled onto this section. I'm grasping at some even nebulous corner case reason why. Casting spells during melee. I don't know. I do not know. But we can talk about it anyway, because sooner or later we got to get through this entire book, right? If we're going to talk about first edition, we've got to talk about all of it. And I think this is pretty straightforward. I don't think I really take any exception with the way in which any of it mechanically functions. I like that the interruption of the charm effect can be handled with a magic circle or circles of protection, or some other such similar spell or effect. All of that's really good. I will say a few things, though, about running such things. You want to be very careful when a monster or a villain or some sort of creature like this that has some charming effect ability, whether it's a Nixie or a vampire or a spellcasting NPC, although that's a different thing. Yeah, let's leave that aside because that's a charm person spell and it has its own thing. Still, let's lump it in with regard to how you want to handle it, because if you have control of another player's character, well, you cannot cause them to do something self-destructive, as this says. It does also say they're almost totally subject to the charmer's will give up personal possessions, betray associates. Now, those two examples alone will be difficult to use in a game with players who are accustomed to having control of their own character. The fact that you can have a vampire tell some heavy-duty fighter to just hand over his sword, and that if charmed in this way, player character would have to comply. This could be the single most powerful item that this adventurer, that this player's character has ever managed to secure, and it could be very much a huge part of that player character's identity within the game. Imagine if Morgana had been able to go to King Arthur and just say, "Hey, hand me your sword." I don't know that that's a great example either. Though are those two people are all that great an example, because we all know what Morgana did with Arthur to then beget Mordred, his illegitimate son. And I think you have to be very, very careful if such subject matter is going to be utilized in game. I think generally speaking, you want to avoid it. I certainly don't think it has its place in a one shot at a game day or a convention where you might not know all of the people involved. In this day and age, I think we have to be very careful about things that could trigger some violently unpleasant memories in people's lives. That it's just not fair to trigger those things and force someone to relive them when they're out trying to enjoy themselves by way of an entertaining game. It's just not right. So avoid all of that stuff. Just don't bring it to the table. Nobody says a vampire has to charm somebody, and certainly a charm utilized to get some PC adventurer, some player character adventurer, to turn on his compadres and help the vampire in a combat is probably the least offensive of a lot of the things being suggested that you could do. I think the argument could be made that in certain situations, such a thing, it would be considered self-destructive, and you may wish to give additional saving throws. You may wish to play up the fact that the player character is fighting against this, right? Is mentally inside and aware of what's going on and making some sort of attempts to deny the will of the charmer. So if you're going to get into these situations and use these kinds of abilities against player characters, then I think you have to be prepared to really understand your players and to be very sure that anything you're doing is not does not have a damaging effect beyond the game. Some people can sit right down, they can play this, they can shrug it off, they can say, okay, I got charmed by a vampire. What's he want me to do? Oh, I gotta beat up my friends. Well, I'm gonna roll the die then. And they'll jump right into to role playing that as if they are controlled, and that is the mark of a very good role player and someone who's played the game and understands that this can be part of it. It doesn't preclude the fact that for some people, things have happened outside the game that make something like this, something of this nature, a very taboo subject, a very unwelcome, potentially unwelcome part of the game that you have to be careful, very careful, if you're going to include it. So take all of that as fair warning. If it's never come up in your games, good. If you're worried it might, at least you've had this time to think about it a little bit and time going forward to give it some thought with those sort of caveats and warnings in place. Certainly if you're going to do something like this, if you're going to include a vampire in a big event at a convention, before somebody signs up for it, you can put some warnings in your description. You can let people know ahead of time. You can remind them at the table before the game begins, hey, remember, I put that in the description. That way, if somebody glossed over the description and somehow missed it, which they should not do, but if somebody did, you can bring up whatever warnings you had in your description at the table at the beginning of the game and make sure that everybody is on the same page with the fact that, and you'll have to dance around it in some ways if you don't want to reveal that there's a vampire involved. Though for one shots, that's not usually a problem. I mean, if the hook is, that people are going missing from a village and bats have been seen and this and that, chances are you're not going to surprise anybody but suddenly saying, 2 hours into a session, oh, hey, and there's a vampire. I bet you didn't see that coming. So, putting warnings into the description are probably best not left too vague. And again, like I say, bring it back up. Bring up the warnings at the beginning of the session at the game in case somebody missed something. They still have the opportunity to step away from the table. If they choose not to, well, you've done everything you can to make sure that people understand the kind of game you're going to be running. And what more can you do? And maybe just not use that stuff at all, but, I don't know that something that triggers one person in a bad way is something that can't be subject for an entertainment or a game, provided it's treated with a certain amount of decorum and approached in a way that does not, still vilifies the action. All that said, when it comes to home games, today, not really. I'm on to a different subject here, because we're talking about the section of the DMG in regard to spellcasting during melee, although this and a couple of things before it are a bit of a miscellany that comes from that section. But in a nutshell, 2-hit armor class 0 is basically THAC0 in a nutshell, right? So there was a time when 2nd edition and before, when armor class went the other way, you were looking for a low number. Let's say no armor is 10 armor class, plate mail and shield is 2. So the better the armor, the lower the number. And it goes on into negative numbers when you have +2 plate and +2 shield might be a -2 armor class. So the object of the idea behind 2-hit armor class 0 was, lower the AC, the better it was. And having +1 plate and +1 shield would put you at armor class 0 rather than armor class 2 because of those 2 pluses. Now, if every player, character, and monster, whatever, wants to hit that person in the +1 plate and +1 shield, they need to know what it takes, what they have to roll to hit an armor class 0. And that varies. Fighters have a better chance of hitting it than magic users, for instance, if they're both wielding, let's say, daggers. So that also is a number that gets easier to make the higher the level of the character. And so there are charts, or were charts during 1st edition that you would just reference quickly and would tell you what it takes to hit armor class 0. And then a player could roll. You say, well, what do you roll? A 14? We'll look on the chart, and maybe you needed a 15. Maybe you only needed a 14. The DM could say you hit and continue on from there. But during 2nd edition, the charts were kind of standardized in such a way that really all the player needed to know was what that particular character at that level needed to hit armor class 0, and then they could extrapolate from there. I would know that if I needed a 14 to hit armor class 0, and the thing I was swinging at was only an armor class 2, that I would only need a 12. So as long as I knew that number, that THACO, that 2-hit armor class 0 number, then everything else was just a quick bit of math in your head, and you could just kind of do it without charts and do it without any fuss or muss. Made it pretty easy. Hopefully that makes some sense. I think now we're turning on dead at the next section. I don't know if I'll do that next week, but I will be doing it sometime soon because it is definitely something worth doing. I do want to thank everybody who popped into the stream today. Be sure to follow the channel. If you're following the channel and you chime in on the stream chat, then I will know you are not a bot. And if I know you're not a bot, well then, I can add you to a list. And every week, on Monday, we announce a winner, if you will. Drawee, somebody who is going to be given something based on being a follower and not being a bot. Bot, says Gaming and BS. It is a new week, so this is a perfect time to get in on the I'm not a bot bandwagon. But thank you very much, Mew Mew V. Appreciate you asking a question. I like to try to answer them every chance I can get. Artanis, thanks for coming in today. Thank you, Sean. I believe it's Sean. Although, Gaming and BS, why, that could be almost anybody. Soul Free Wolf is here, too. Great. You guys were all being so quiet during the lecture portion, the pontification portion of the show. I appreciate you coming in today, though. Can't follow any more people for some dumb reason. Twitch has a limit for some silly reason. Is that right? I was unaware that Twitch had a limit on the number of people you could follow. Well, hopefully they'll get that worked out. Maybe you can shoot the mods or whoever, the powers that be at Twitch, a note and ask them if that is something that is accidentally happening to you or something that can be changed. So maybe you go through your old list. Maybe there's people that aren't actually real people anymore, or maybe there's a number of people you're accidentally following that are bots, and then you can unfollow them, and you'll have some room under your cap. But enough to say that. I want to thank everybody for following the channel. This has been a rules retrospective on first edition AD&D DMG rules on spellcasting during melee. That is the follow-up sections to that, although somewhat unrelated, obviously. Hey, 10 a.m. every day. Come on back, because tomorrow is weekly news and announcements. Tuesday, cartography and world building campaign discussion on Wednesday. GMing tips on Thursday. Building adventures on Friday. GM reviews on Saturday. And then back around the horn to our rules retrospective every Sunday. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, thank you very much. Please do subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up on the videos that you watch. We'd appreciate it. Also, if you have some constructive criticism, you want to help us out a little bit, feel free to say something in the comments. It's always appreciated. Or maybe just give us an attaboy, a warm fuzzy, a pat on the back, a virtual, hey, well done there, fella, kind of thing. And that's okay, too, because encouragement in this wonderful year of 2020 Goes a long way, I think. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Thank you very much, everybody, and bye-bye.